just love to take this opportunity to introduce Ishi ma'am to everyone present here. She has been a practicing clinical nutritionist, columnist, author, and entrepreneur, and avid researcher. And she has been involved in clinical practice at the Center of Dietary Counseling in Delhi for a pretty long time. And we already saw a book of hers. The other few books that she has written is Eating at Work, The Diet Doctor, and I have personally read The Diet Doctor and I loved it. I loved how you approached it, honestly. And so she also has been working in this field for a very long time. So I guess people who are curious to know what diets to go with and what are the shoulds and should nots, I guess today's session is going to be a eye-opening session for them. So Isha ma'am, the stage is yours, and I would ask our dearest Anvita ma'am to take the lead from here for moderating, please. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Priyanka.
Thank you, Priyanka. And Ishi, once again, welcome to DeepRanjani Foundation. And it's a pleasure that finally we are hosting you today. And whatever introduction Priyanka just shared, above everything, I would like all the participants to know that Ishi Khosla is a person with a very big heart and a person with all genuinity, and she's always there for the right cause. And she actually has devoted her life for something which she believes in. And there are people, which also includes me, who are alive, healthy because of her. So she is definitely a diet doctor, and above all, she's a wonderful human being. And one thing which I would like to mention, which is very rare, that there are very few clinical nutritionists in our country who are focusing on the special needs. And it's a privilege to have someone who's leading our country in this particular area. And she's someone who's having a global presence at this moment with a lot of very serious research work and practice in the field of special needs and nutrition. Ishi, the stage is all yours, and we are here to listen to you today.
Thank you for that very generous introduction, Amrita. And I have to just add to the fact that, yes, I am committed, but it's a privilege to be able to share my learnings over the last decade with an organization headed by you, led by you, because I also see the genuine work that is going on the ground and what you are involved in for the last so many years. So it is indeed a pleasure. It's not just a cosmetic lecture that somebody is organizing, and I know that you mean business. So I personally would, because I haven't prepared anything, I haven't made any specific, notes or anything like that. So I would just share my learnings. But if you would like to, lead this with specific questions so that it flows in a logical sequence,
right,
we can do that.
Yeah. So we would be very happy if you can start with the importance of diet in case of everybody, particularly special needs, particularly focusing on the behavioral challenges that they face. It's not just about autism, it's also about the other kind of special needs. So I believe that most of us are not aware of the fact that how food, how gut can impact behavior of an individual on day-to-day basis. So I would really appreciate if you can start with that.
Right. So that is something well said, that food is the underlying cause for almost all the issues that we are facing. And when you say special needs, I think we will include autism and ADHD, ADD, maybe even some other genetic disorders. And is there anything else that I have left out?
Yes, I would love to include the developmental disorder in the entire spectrum of developmental disorder. Yeah.
Yes. And we are seeing too much of it. And if I have to just share a simple, you want me to speak in Hindi, right?
Yes, Hindi and English, I think all the participants will be acquainted.
So the audience right now is are your caregivers?
They are parents of special needs. They are professionals in the field of special needs, and they are not just from DeepRanjani Foundation. They are from various organizations and parts of West Bengal.
Okay. So then this is in order that I'll just share this one statistic with you, that about 20 years ago, the autism rate was 1 in 10,000, which was a rare condition. Anything which is 1 in 10,000 is really a rare condition. It's only 20 years ago. And today we sit at 1 in 59 and likely to be 1 in 49 very soon, which really is completely hard to explain. If it was just genetic, it doesn't change that fast.
Ishi, and globally, it's one in every 20 newborn.
Yes, it's declining.
Yeah.
And I'm sharing some data which is almost like few years old. So, and they were expecting things to go worse in the next few years. So I haven't quoted anything very recent. So certainly, and mind you, if this is global, the Indian data is not different. It's very similar. We don't have too many of our own studies to quote, but whatever we know is very close to this. So it's shocking, and it's obviously something of a wake-up call for all of us to address that what is going wrong. We cannot blame our genes. And the other usual argument is, oh, we are diagnosing more. No, these are developmental issues. We can't be diagnosed. There's no, we're not testing people. We can see these things happen, and we are experiencing them, and we know that now they are a part of our friends and families, our circles that we probably never ever saw. So it's a really a wake-up call, and to understand this today, we are far better than what we were about a decade ago. And the conversation today boils down to what is happening in the gut. Whatever is happening in the gut is affecting every cell of our body, including the nervous system, the nervous cells, the nervous system in the terms of psychiatric disorders and neurological disorders. Everything will be manifested when the nerves are getting, or the neurons are getting affected. And the nerve center of our body today, we have always believed that it is a brain and the spinal cord, but today we know that the gut is literally our second brain, and there are more signals from the brain, from the gut to the brain, than the brain to the gut. So if there are 8 signals coming from the gut to the brain, there's 1 from the brain. So there is a lot of cross connection, or what we call the gut-brain axis. And if there is a disturbance in the gut, obviously it is going to affect almost all the neurological developmental issues we can think of, including what we are talking about, addressing special needs. So basically, what could be bothering the gut so much? Why we can now say that that changes in the food, what is coming in contact with the gut, what it's the intestines, the stomach, basically the digestive system. What goes in is our food. So how could our food go so horribly different? Or what could be the trigger in the gut to change this, to the cause the impact and change the neurological behavior of our of all of us? So it is basically inflammation, and inflammation is nothing but like a slow fire. And why is there more inflammation today than it was earlier? Is because our food has changed. Our ecosystem has changed. When we have got food which is coming from factories, from industrialized agricultural practices which have changed. All of those changes in food have affected our insides. So the ecosystem outside has affected the ecosystem within us. And that has caused a disturbance in what we call the gut microbiome. The gut microbiome is nothing but all the microbes which you can't see from your naked eye. The bacteria, the fungus, the all the viruses. There are tons and tons of flora which sits in the gut. And when I say tons, actually it weighs between 2 to 3 kilos. And these are things which we don't see from the naked eye. And these are really holding the key to our health, or rather our ill health. So if there are good and bad bacteria. Some bacteria are good for us, some bacteria are not good for us. Some flora is good and some is bad. Now, when this balance gets disturbed, it is a state of what we call dysbiosis. Now, dysbiosis is something of a abnormal ratio of good and bad flora, which leads to problems that we see. So when they are out of balance, they cause inflammation. They cause inflammation in the gut, in the local inside the gut, and that inflammation damages the gut lining. You know, the gut lining is a one single cell layer membrane, which if it gets constantly inflamed, so it's like your skin. If you're constantly getting some kind of inflammation and you're hitting against something, it is going to get thinner and worn off. And then it can allow the passage of unwanted, undesirable components from the food, as well as other toxins to go into the bloodstream, which then wakes up the immune system. The immune system cannot understand half digested food. It cannot understand so many toxins, and a whole lot of things like heavy metals, etc. Also, they cross into the bloodstream, causing a cascade of reactions and causing even more inflammation through the body. Then it's called systemic inflammation, and this low-grade systemic inflammation is the reason for damaging our neurons and causing our bodies to dysfunction, and be it, like I said, these development. So now, why are we seeing this? These begin very early, right? So the biggest culprit today for inflammation or dysbiosis in the gut is one of the biggest culprits we have identified in research is wheat, right? And we have eaten wheat for thousands and thousands of years. It's been there. But somewhere post the Green Revolution or whatever, this wheat has become immunogenic. It provokes the immune system, and it's not sitting well with our digestive systems. And there could be many reasons for it. We don't need to get into that right now. But the reason is, when your body is reacting to wheat gluten, it is creating, like I said, the leaky gut. The gluten does not get broken down, and the body is making antibodies against gluten once it's in the blood. So when you have antibodies floating in your blood against a protein called gluten, these will cause what we excitement of the immune system, and then inflammation of a particular kind. And how then does this explain congenital problems? How does this explain autism? How does this explain, how is the connection? Because these are very early days, you see these problems very early. So these children who are suffering are getting the antibodies If the mother is reacting to modern wheat, these are being transferred very early in almost the second and third trimester of pregnancy to the baby. So if the baby he's not even started eating, so forget the gluten and forget, but the body is already receiving ammunition against wheat in the womb. So the baby is becoming inflamed. And that is how we explain so much of congenital problem today. It can be diabetes, it can be thyroid congenital problems, congenital, everything today we are seeing very early. And bit by bit, we see kids developing problems in their development, obviously. Those who are at risk. Now, this is not happening to everybody, right? But these are kids whose mothers or their parents have already had some kind of an abnormal reaction to this trigger food. And that's how this whole thing can be explained and why we are seeing a surge of problems right after this 1960s. 1960s, 20 years later, we saw the epidemic of heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and thereon new problems and more cancer. We're seeing all of that becoming far more in the face. So the audience today, whoever is listening, must get 2 or 3 messages here. I'm going to repeat. It's low-grade inflammation, which is the starting point of all diseases today, including developmental disorders. Of course, we have genetic disorders as well, but leaving those out, leaving the genetic disorders out, all these developmental disorders that we are speaking about, behavioral problems, etc., we are seeing kids today at risk, and they're starting with inflammation very early. I have had kids who are taking, at the age of 11, anti-anxiety medicines. And it's not one, several kids today between 10 and 15 are on anti-anxiety pills, or they are on drugs for ADHD, etc. So basically, it's that, and the biggest contributor of low-grade inflammation in our modern lifestyles, besides many others, there are others, I'm going to talk about those as well, is the food. And contributing factor is wheat, and the modern wheat particularly, along with lots of medication, antibiotics, hormones, and other pesticides, the toxic environment that we are, the air pollution, the water, the toxins, the heavy metals. So that entire ecosystem adds up. So ultimately, it's a combination, a cumulative effect. But the main culprit is low-grade inflammation started by dysbiosis. Starting point is dysbiosis, leading to what we have as deficiency diseases. We are seeing anemia, iron deficiency is very common, B12 deficiency, magnesium deficiency, a host of micronutrients, which we are seeing as compromised today because the gut is compromised. We all know that the gut's main function is to digest food and to absorb the nutrients. So obviously, when the gut is inflamed, absorption of nutrients is not going to be optimal. So we, from that spectrum, nutritional deficiencies, so dysbiosis, deficiencies, disorders, and diseases. That's how it flows. And the good thing is that specifically for certain developmental disorders like autism and ADHD, we know that going on a gluten-free diet or a milk-free diet, a dairy, we call it a casein-free diet, certainly helps in managing them much better. And sometimes even reversals have been seen in certain cases. We do have documentation of those kind of things happening. Just working on the gut and eliminating certain things has helped in reversal. So these are real-time stories. But the root cause has to be addressed, and which means that we have to correct the imbalance of the gut flora. So having good probiotics, prebiotics, removing the inflammatory food, not only gluten, it could be milk protein, it could be sugar, too much of sugar, it could be trans fats. All of those things need to be out of the diet. And then we can actually hope to heal the gut. And heal the gut would mean that heal the nervous system, heal the brain and the second brain in the gut, and seeing the difference and transformational changes. And these I see on a routine basis in my patients. And the good thing is that we also see that reintroduction or abuse or putting back a trigger food we see the rollback happening as very, very evident that, we have removed something and the patient is feeling better, and we put it back and we see the patient rolling back into the same situation. So the touch points are clear. The joining of the dots is very clear, and we can see from mothers who have had pregnancies which are difficult. Either they've had hormones or they've had too much of fertility treatment. For other reasons, they have been given medication for infections. Some kind of exposure to toxins during the pregnancy increases the risk of these problems. So the science is getting so much more clearer. And of course, it's not only about building a healthy microbiome. It's also about restoring the good bacteria. It's also about rebuilding the nutritional status, because there is a compromise. So we also need to give, all the nutrients, micronutrients, which are important, back into the system. And then we see the best results. And building up of the gut lining also, we require specific things to be given, and anti-inflammatory foods. Removing the inflammatory foods is one, but we also have anti-inflammatory components in our diet which need to be added. So it's the 4 R's. It's removing, replacing, rebuilding, and restoring. So that's how we work towards the diet.
Yes, that was so insightful, Ishi. I would like you to explain more on when you are talking about wheat, when you are talking about gluten. So we are people not from nutrition fraternity. So we would like to know, in our regular practice, what are the foods that contains wheat? I mean, generally we know it's atta, maida, and those kind of things. Are there any other sources of wheat?
No, I think that's a very, very good question, because it will help me address everything beyond just wheat, because the science is so clear today that there are wheat, of course, in all its avatars, in all its forms, which is just wheat flour, atta, maida, dalia, and suji, which is rava, semolina. So all forms of wheat, which basically would include typically the breads that we have, all the bakery products. It would include all the naans and the pizzas and the noodles and the pastas, etc. Now, it's not
and the biscuits too.
Bakery, yes, all the cakes and the rusks and the bakery. And but it doesn't stop here. There are other grains which behave for the immune system the same way as wheat. They don't have wheat, they don't have gluten, but they have corn, but they like the protein in corn, the protein in soya, and the protein in oats. These are very healthy grains, but for the immune system, they behave the same way and react the same way, cause the same inflammation. Because it's like you have the chicken pox and the herpes virus and the COVID virus. There is something in common. So this common thread, there's like one gang, they behave the same way. So when we are working on this diet, we need to remove the protein in corn, so which means corn starch is fine, but corn flour like makki ka atta or popcorn or sweet corn or products made out of those like nachos are also in the red list. And therefore, these are not these are not, commonly addressed in research today. They're very new areas, very, very cutting edge information here. So, one of the reasons why we see that sometimes in research there is a mixed result. Some researchers are saying, yes, there is an improvement with the gluten-free diet, and some are on the border and they don't get clear-cut results. The reason is because these other grains are not being addressed. And they say that 50% of people on a gluten-free diet continue to have symptoms, and we do see that. And so the healing will happen only when you become grain wise, as I call them. Grain wise means corn, soya, oats, and to some extent, even things like in my clinical experience, I have found buckwheat to be a trigger food, as well as sabudana. Sabudana is like sago. So that also seems to be triggering some kind of an inflammation in the system. So if you are able to deal with removal of these grains, and of course substitute with the right grains, which include rice, but in a unpounded, in a unpolished way, that hand pounded rice or brown rice, or it could be millets. But millets is, again, I think today is come of age. The United Nations and the Honorable Prime Minister have declared 2023 as a year of millets, and for good reasons. So millets are gluten-free, and millets can make excellent products, which we make with wheat conventionally. So there are instant noodles, there are, the breakfast cereals, you have noodles, and you have pasta, and a whole lot of things which are being made today, thanks to the government's initiative to promote millets. And they're increasingly becoming available. And of course, it's early days, but the awareness is much more than before. So I'm sure on Amazon and all these platforms, they are not even very expensive. So that's the other thing. So they should be affordable grains. So that is a huge revival as alternates. And we also have now Indian quinoa. We also have we don't have, we have pulse flours, things like besan and sattu and the moong dal attas. So these are also good things to add, and to add protein and to make the diet nutritious. So making the grain change is critical. Removing dairy, because again, dairy doesn't have gluten, but somewhere milk protein triggers opioid centers of the brain, which because they have these what we call casomorphine, like we have gluteomorphine. So they excite those centers of the brain and cause abnormal behaviors. So milk protein is a problem. It's not lactose intolerance, I want to clarify. It's the milk protein which is an issue. So a lot of people just pick up lactose-free milk thinking it's a lactose problem, but it's not. So casein-free food is critical, and that means even whey protein can be a problem. So avoid those kind of proteins, which are easy. They don't become they're not really a integral part of our diet. So essentially, if you're able to eliminate this and give a diet which is an anti-inflammatory diet, which means a lot of vegetables, fruits, brightly colored, the reds and the yellows and the purples, brightly colored vegetables and fruits, and fermented foods, which are very simple in our diets. Even pickles are fermented. We have idli dosa, which is fermented. We have kanji, which is fermented, and there are so many other, pickles, etc., which in Indian food is there. So, so having fermented foods as a prebiotic, and having probiotic-rich foods, and also preparations which are non-dairy, and making sure that your levels of certain vitamins, particularly vitamin D, is critical. Vitamin D is an anti-inflammatory vitamin. Having adequate levels of magnesium, regardless of blood tests, is critical. Getting in the omega-3 fats is critical in rebuilding that ratio. And so elimination and adding valuable, supplements or foods will be really literally the game changer. So I say that, the grain change can literally be the game change here. And we see that happening.
Thank you so much, Ishi. While listening to you, I was just wondering that the wheat bucket that you are talking about, we have been India as a culture, as a food habit, we are consuming it for thousands of years. So why suddenly the increase in the gut inflammation after such a long time? Because the grains that we're talking about, this had always been the primary grains of our country. So what exactly happened? What is the research saying, and what is the understanding of the practitioners?
See, that's a very good question, and it must be addressed. It's a common sense question. And the thing is that wheat has a protein called gluten, and wheat per se has been is a known allergen. Wheat allergy is known. There are 8 allergens, which include soya and includes egg and includes fish and nuts and tree nuts and shellfish, etc. So wheat is one of the 8 allergens, which means it has a potential. Like rice doesn't have that, millets don't have that. They're not in a allergen category. But wheat has the potential to excite immune systems in certain people who have wheat allergy, right? So it is an immunogenic grain to some. That was recognized. Then we realized that about 100 years ago, that in certain people, it destroyed the gut through an immune reaction in a form called celiac disease. So that kind of association of wheat protein injuring the gut in people who had celiac disease got established, and the whole the celiac enteropathy was discovered, and they found that it was not only children who were getting affected, there were adults, and the average age today is 50 years or 40 to 50 years for diagnosis of celiac disease, and that it is affecting, and it's a system which is not only getting affected, it's a multi-system and multi-symptom disorder. So it can affect your digestive system, or it can affect your brain, or it can affect your joints, or it can affect your hair or skin, or liver, kidney, anything. So it's a multi-system and so there were no clear-cut, some people had no symptoms, some people had very obvious symptoms, some people had mild symptoms, some people, and mostly the symptoms were, so if they were earlier associating all the symptoms of celiac disease with gut, like bloating and digestive disorders, they now found that that number has fallen down to only 25-30%. Mostly there are people who have symptoms outside the gut. So you could be having celiac disease. So that was established in the last 50 years, and celiac disease has grown for almost 4 times since the 1970s. It's really, it's not like we're diagnosing more, it's actually increasing. And so that was one form of then apparently about 1% of the population, again globally, suffers from celiac disease. And rice-eating nations like Japan, etc., don't have celiac disease. So anyway, so that was a second discovery, that there is a wheat allergy. Then we discovered celiac disease. And then in the 1960s, post-1960s, 20 years later, we are seeing that people who have the same symptoms as celiac disease, but they don't test positive on the test for celiac disease. And that continued to happen. And even in my practice, we kept dismissing patients who said, oh, we don't have, but we feel better without wheat. Our symptoms go away without wheat, but we're not. So a whole new entity called non-celiac wheat sensitivity, NCWS, was discovered. And what happened here? It is hard to to say that this is what happened, but this is what is likely to have happened. That we created a high yielding variety due to the famine, in the country in that time. In the 1960s, the Green Revolution was initiated to feed people who were dying of hunger. There wasn't enough food, and we had very limited food. We had rations for basics and staples and sugar, etc. So Norman Borlaug was a researcher in the US who discovered this new variant of wheat, which is very different in looks phenotypically from the ancient varieties. Wheat was a tall grass, and the new variant, which became a high-yielding variant, is a short dwarf and with multiple seeds. And this was made or designed or modified to be also pesticide resistant, to be pest resistant, and to be having high yielding crops. And all of that led to some changes, and we don't know, safety trials were done. So when we have meddled perhaps with a known allergen which has an immunogenic potential, we have not realized that it has created something for almost everybody. Even if we don't have celiac disease, we are getting affected. And number two, but like I said, it became pesticide resistant. A lot of antifungal agents called glyphosates were sprayed indiscriminately on wheat because the plant was going to tolerate extra amounts. It was engineered to be like that. So too much of sprays of pesticides, particularly glyphosate, was done in that time. And that could have or must have added to the problems it has created to all of us in some form or the other. So these are the changes which have happened. And therefore, I feel, when you actually track things down, you can join the dots. Those born before 1960s and those born after the 1960s, exposure to modern wheat are different. And, I can see it in the genetics are the same, but the manifestation of diseases is earlier in people born post 60s versus before 60s. So these are all early conversations, but certainly a lot changed. And we can see that, a lot of things, even millets were used. Millets were used, like 40% of our staples was millets earlier, the cultivation. Today it is sitting at 20%. And, the decline in millets and increase in wheat and rice have somewhere caused problems.
So Ishi, whatever you were saying, it's extremely scary. I'm sure it's not just me. If not, it's the same for all the participants. So I would like to go back to the first part of your discussion, where you mentioned that maybe in case of the newborn, they are inheriting this gut inflammation while being in the neonatal stage. So is there any kind of test available that can be used before pregnancy, that can detect this kind of inflammation in a woman, so that the possibility of inheriting the same to the child can be reduced? Is there any such test available?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very, very, very good question, because you can really change lives. So a mother who does not eat wheat during pregnancy, obviously, unless she has a gene for celiac disease or something, which is different, but she can protect her baby, because if the baby is not primed to react through in the womb, later we can give the ancient non-immunogenic varieties of wheat later to the child without having problems. So there are older varieties today of wheat available. And if the child is, so the mother has to do definitely a test must be screened for celiac disease, and what we call an IgG food intolerance test. The food intolerance test just, So it's called a delayed, it's not an allergy test. So it's a IgG, delayed food intolerance test, which the mother should do for sure. That's a fabulous idea. Plus screen herself for celiac disease. And there are tests for celiac disease, the anti-tissue transglutaminase antibodies or anti-endomycelial antibodies, anti-gliadin antibodies. So these are tests which we have today, which are fairly good tests, but again, they need to be interpreted. Sometimes the test is negative, but there are other markers which we can see. So an anti-inflammatory marker like CRP should also be done. And if the mother herself has an autoimmune problem, if the mother has a history of anemia unexplained, or B12 deficiency, or a weight issue, or diabetes, or any other health issues, which is a chronic, chronic health issue, that is a red flag anyway for somebody who's established, and or a history of miscarriages, or a history of any kind of joint or inflammatory condition. So those women definitely need to do the food intolerance test. And if the woman is generally all right and doesn't have a family history or herself a medical history, then just a simple food intolerance test should be all right. And that can save the baby. And if the mother is on a millet diet and eats her supplements well, then we can certainly create a situation where the child can be protected and we can save a lot of misery later.
Ishi, as we speak, I guess that this is still not a practice among the medical professionals in the gynecology or pediatrics field as of now. I'm sure we have a hope in near future to that they will also consider these areas, and the screening part will be done as per these new research findings. So
these are guidelines which have not. These are guidelines which there's somebody saying can't hear anything. I hope you can.
She needs to check with the audio.
Yeah. So essentially, these are going to come into guidelines much later, if ever they do. But at an individual level, one can take these practices in our own hands. Like I said, the government has come up with the millet story, which is very, very a positive message. So the underlying, the spin-off is that it is gluten-free. And so if bit by bit, there is understanding. So for instance, doctors were not on board on a gluten-free diet or a millet diet for diabetes. But today, the same doctors, within a matter of 1 year, are now saying that, oh, our patients are doing very well with millets, they were refusing to believe. So these are things which may take a long time to change. But as individuals, since this is a small group, one can certainly, and you're talking of high-risk individuals here. So somewhere, I think, even if it begins, regardless of advice by a gynecologist or the doctor, and we see that all the time. I mean, I have a patient who came to me. I cite this example for you because this was a 43-year-old mother. Mother means she was trying to conceive and she had multiple miscarriages. She was anemic all her life. Nobody ever bothered to screen her for celiac disease or wheat sensitivity. And when she came to me, because of the hormonal treatment, she had gained a lot of weight. So she came for weight loss, nothing else. So I said, even your fertility treatment will not work unless you go off the grains I'm asking you to do and follow the diet. So this was her last chance. And so she agreed and she followed it. In 3 months, she had a successful implantation and it was twins that she had. Now the question was her hemoglobin was 8 and to start with. And then the gynecologist asked her to start iron. And she said, I have a very bad digestion. I cannot tolerate iron. So when she discussed this with me, I said, look, if you follow the diet, maybe you'll start absorbing enough iron and you will not need any iron further than that. So don't worry, we'll just be faithful to the diet. And which she did. From there, and everybody must know that if during pregnancy, if the woman has a hemoglobin of 12, it usually goes down to about 11 or 10. So it's always 2 notches down or a few notches down. It falls below. So there was, in her case, there was no room to lose more. So we were watching her very closely. In the 3rd trimester, her hemoglobin with twins, without any iron, without any supplement of iron, was 12.5. Which means that suddenly her gut was absorbing in a time which was a compromised time for her, but she had never seen a 12.5. So we see these real time, and she did not develop. She was already on a high blood pressure pill, which the blood pressure never rose. She did not develop gestational diabetes. Her parents are diabetic. She had all the risk factors, but we were able to keep it a very healthy pregnancy. And of course, the twins were, of course, very healthy, and they're doing very well. So there are several examples to be cited here that, the science is so accurate, and we can at individual levels take that call and without, losing anything, save lives of children in the future.
Right. That sounds so promising, particularly the example. So when we are talking about gluten-free, so I'm sure the participants would like to know what are the, in a day-to-day regular diet chart, what are the things that is safe to eat? We understand that no gluten, but particularly if a person is a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian. So what are their safe choices for food?
So I'm going to rephrase this and say it is not only a gluten-free, casein-free diet, it is an anti-inflammatory or a healthy gluten-free diet. It can be very unhealthy. I can eat all the, rice and the potatoes and the, street food, which is, no, I need to have an anti-inflammatory. I said that earlier as well. So you need to make the right alternatives. You need to have healthier alternatives, and you also need to have healthier components into the food. So build the right vegetables and fruits, and no juices, and sugar. Sugar is a big no-no for the gut. So in fact, the book that I just showed you, the 4Gs, gut, girth, gluten, and glucose. So sugar itself can be a problem. It's not sweetness. Remember, I'm not talking of sweetness, I'm talking of sugar, processed sugar. So if you can keep these things out and build the diet around proteins, healthy proteins, which means having plant protein in the form of lentils, sprouts, and chickpeas, the chanas and the besans and all these things. Healthy proteins can also come from nuts. Peanuts and almonds, and chanas also are a part of that. It's not a nut, but plant protein, which is easy. And sattu, another form of chana, is a plant protein, and sprouts. So these can be incorporated along with eggs, along with fish and good quality poultry, and even lamb. So these are very valuable in basically making the skeletal or the making the framework of the diet, and put vegetables along with it. Lots of vegetables, brightly colored vegetables. Add the fruits in between, add the nuts in between, and the grains according to the child's needs. If the child has a weight problem, or the child is underweight, depending on those needs, whether it's unpolished rice or it's a little bit of a combination, sometimes you need to do, that's fine. Polished rice and unpolished rice. It could be quinoa, it could be millets, and it could be, a combination of lentils and cereals, flours, and products made out of that. So rotis, breads, noodles, pasta, all these made with alternative grains or with rice are the best options. And even if you have to make dairy options, dairy alternatives, almond milk, coconut milk, rice milk, but not oat milk, work very well. And they may not be milk as such, but they work as substitutes. And something to be said here is specifically about fats, that good fats are actually good for us, and we have abandoned fats for the wrong reasons. We've put them out with the fear of heart disease, diabetes, etc., which is completely ill-founded. We need good fats to build up a healthy gut, particularly fats like butter, ghee, coconut, and fish oils, and unrefined oils, cold-pressed oils. These are excellent sources of fuel for the gut, particularly butter and ghee. Dairy fats are actually very, very useful, and unless you have a severe allergy to cow's milk. And the gut lining actually becomes stronger with the good fats. And mustard oil, in Calcutta, I should not omit mustard oil. A cold pressed mustard oil is very high on what we call omega-3 fats. They're precursors of brain fats, and brain tissue is really mostly fat. And we need to build up this anti-inflammatory fat in our diets. So I think we feared fats for too long, and a high fat diet, even in things like bone broth and giving a lot of good fat, helps to improve the functionality of the body. And the reversals that we have seen are really coming from high-fat diets. And I have omitted camel milk here, but the addition of camel milk has been found to be therapeutic to these children. So if you can source camel milk, the camel is fed with a healthy diet, can be also a huge game changer for such people. So, but again, the mechanisms doesn't matter. But the fact is that if we eat a certain way, we can keep the children from being absolutely normal, functional, depending on where they stand today. But in many cases, also see reversals. So this is real time, and before, we don't have to wait for guidelines. We can actually do it.
Thank you so much, Ishi. I was just wondering, you were talking about anti-inflammatory diet. So what about when we are talking about multicolored vegetables and chicken, fish, and everything? What about the chemicals, the pesticides, and the preservatives used on regular basis? So does it also contribute to the inflammation of the gut?
Oh, 100%. Yes, they do. But it's, if you say you have to start somewhere, you have to start somewhere. You cannot be in a utopian state. But if your financial status permits it to get organic versions, I mean, a huge service done. And particularly free range chicken and eggs, and good diets fed to the eggs. There are eggs with omega-3 enriched yolks, thanks to the feed. So if we can get there, nothing like it. But I think that's a conversation too early for all of us, because our environments are so polluted. How much will you change? Can you change the air? Can you change the water? But yes, if you can grow your own patches of vegetable, that's not difficult. At least the greens and certain vegetables that you eat fresh and are easy to grow in your patches of land that you have. And if you have an institution where you have the facility of having, fields and gardens, grow your own as much as possible. So reduction of those toxic chemicals and exposure to toxic chemicals in whatever way can be reduced, it really has a huge benefit, for sure. For sure.
Right. Thank you. And I'm sure the participants would like to know, when we're talking about gluten alternatives, when you're talking about millet, when you're talking about quinoa, it's a pleasure that it's available these days more commonly in the regular market than before. But still, there is a huge lack of supply, I would say, and the common people, they are not aware of it. They do not know which one to choose and which one not to choose. So is there any possibility, because I know you are already working through Whole Foods and you are supplying this pan India and beyond maybe. So is there a possibility for the common people to access gluten-free or this non-inflammatory food sources in future, or I mean in recent future?
Yes, today I think Amazon is doing a great job of offering so much out there. But here I'd like to just add, if we do millet flours in a flour mill, which is using wheat or soya or oats or corn, it can have a contamination. And because it's an immune reaction, even small amounts like 20 parts per million can be detected by the immune system and give you symptoms. And I do see that happening in my patients. So my advice to you would be, if you are doing this seriously, if you are embracing this as a lifestyle, then ensure that you pick up these foods not from just anywhere or a grocery store, from manufacturers of celiac friendly products. So that just reading a gluten-free label should not be the idea, because by default, the flour is gluten-free. But when you check it in the lab, it has gluten because of the contamination. So where you source your flour, but you can also buy the grain and make it in your own facility at home. Maybe you can invest in a flour mill if you are wanting, because these children, the systems pick it up very quickly. So if you can do that at home, that's very well. And Amazon does a fairly large portfolio of stuff which is available. Yesterday I was at a ministry meeting, and they were talking about millets. And there is this brand called Millets for You, who's doing quite a portfolio of products, right from instant noodles to popped grains, etc. Now, so that you'll have to do a little research on your own to look at the right brands. I can tell you Whole Foods is definitely something which we know is dedicated. It's not mine anymore, but still I know that the processes are being adhered to. Then there are some other brands as well, but I think this is not the forum to talk about specific brands. But yes, we can share that information. Maybe you can speak to my office, and those manufacturers we know are working towards it can be contacted. And so that is about the foods. And I would say that essentially just keep to the right sources, and too much of alternative food also becomes a problem. The people ultimately just think, oh, it's a gluten-free diet, so we can have rice, and we have too much of starch is to be avoided. Increase your intake of proteins and fats and vegetables, and keep the starches under control, because too much of insulin can be inflammatory as well. That's a part of the book that I'm talking about.
Right.
So hyper focus on the alternatives is also not a great idea. And of course, in situations of eating out, rice is always an option.
Right. So what you said, if I understand correctly, that means preparing roti made of wheat in the same kitchen along with millet can also contaminate the millet product inside the same kitchen, right?
No, if it's the same kitchen, just clean the tawa and clean the duster and the surface where you're making it. So just wash it, or first make that one and make the other one. If you're making something fried, use that first. Clean oil should be used first, and then the others can make whatever. And that's one. And there's something to be said about millets. Some millets can be a little harsh. They are too fibrous. So if you have a digestive issue, or you're not improving, maybe begin with the smaller millets, little millets, which are the softer ones. Not all millets are the same. And sometimes people have a problem making a chapati made out of millet. So there is a tip here, which I also just learned recently, that you boil water If it's a one cup of flour, 3/4 cup of water, any millet flour, or it could be rice also. So 3/4 cup of water should be boiled, and the flour should be then cooked in that water till it becomes like a dough, and leave that for about half an hour, and then make the chapati, and it comes out like a excellent chapati. So a little tip there can help people a lot, because there is an acceptable palate issue also. Things have to taste well, and particularly for children.
That was my next question as well, because the gluten-free roti and the conventional taste can never be achieved with the gluten-free products. So you just shared a process with us. I'm sure we are going to try it, because this sounds very, very promising.
Yes.
Yes. So before we move further, I think Priyanka, if we have some questions from the participants on the chat box, or if someone wants to ask some question.
Yes, ma'am. So we have one question from Advik. Should we add probiotics with their diet? I guess she's Shompa ma'am, if I'm not wrong. She's asking about diet of Advik. So Advik is a 3.5-year-old child. And I guess she's asking about what if she can add probiotics to his diet.
Yeah. Of course, absolutely. What is the problem Advik has?
So Advik has, I guess, ma'am, would you please intervene?
Advik is in the spectrum, Ishi. He's 3.5 years old. And so I think his mother is here today, and she's asking for the probiotic inclusion in the food.
Must be added, and a high quality probiotic. Not all are the same. A good quality probiotic, definitely.
Can you explain what is a good quality probiotic?
Good quality probiotic, it would be from the brand, and something which is kept in the cold, not at room temperature. And a cocktail of probiotics work better. And you can seek some personal advice on certain strains which have now been identified specifically for this condition.
Okay. Thank you so much. Priyanka, we have other questions, I guess.
Yeah, we had another question from Kanika. Should brand mention gluten tested reference and packaging along with gluten-free logo? So she's asking, I guess, about the packaging, that how should we identify a product which is gluten-free and gluten tested? So yeah,
it's very tough in India so far. So you'll have to do, like I said, your own research here. But at least today there is mention of gluten-free. Earlier, a few years ago, that was not the case. So, just buying a flour which is gluten-free, you have to see the manufacturer history. And if that today everything is available online, you do a search on the company and understand the products that the company is making, and or you can call up the company and find out if they are making it in a common flour mill or not.
ma'am, we also had a question from another participant. She wanted to know about how to deal with. She mentioned the term, that feeling of over hunger. So I guess, so lack of satiety, we can take it as that. Who is 13-year-old and is in the spectrum of autism, and she also wanted to understand how to measure the appropriate quantity for the child.
It's absolutely impossible, but this is a clear red flag and telling us that the regulatory mechanisms by the gut microbiome have all got altered, which is why she's always hungry. So she is definitely a candidate for grain shrimp. So certainly, if she changes her diet, she will see a difference, and she must increase the intake of good fats, which have higher satiety value. So giving the child peanut butter, some nut preparations, or with milk, almond milk, or whatever, coconut milk, increase the intake of fats and reduce carbohydrates and change the grains will certainly help, along with increasing vegetables.
Right. And we had a question about workouts. Should I ask it out to you?
Workouts.
Yeah. So there we had a question that what type of physical workout can be applied with a teen who has a soft muscular development. So that is the question we received. Yeah.
So I think the reason for the soft muscle or the developmental issue in the tissues is clearly something which it's something which will change once the nutritional uptake is improved. And so I would rather not, adjust the exercise, of course, for the time being, but get to the root cause of this issue. And we know that this changes. Muscle development, not being able to make muscle is also one of the signs. So change of diet is certainly warranted.
So I think the response to the answer to the question is it's not just about physical activity. It's a lot about the diet.
Of course,
So,
absolutely. To get the maximum out of your workout, you need to work on your diet.
right.
Okay, and we have two questions actually coming up to us repeatedly. You already mentioned it, but I would just like you to brief it down again to maybe one or two statements. That what are the dietary choices for someone who's hyperactive and is or maybe is not on the spectrum? Because a lot of mothers and fathers and parents are worried about how the food is impacting the hyperactivity. So will you please just repeat all of it in just a brief? Yeah.
I think we've said it all, with avoiding junk food, processed food, excessive sugar, caffeine, etc. These are the typical issues, and cutting down on inflammatory triggers. We've discussed this. It'll be the same, absolutely the same. And of course, for people who don't have that, then normal diet is fine. But even in a normal diet, it is good to have combination of grains.
Right.
So I think, Ishi, what you said, it's not just about autism or ADHD. Even with those kids who are having any sorts of disruptive behavior or challenging behaviors, this non-inflammatory diet pattern should be maintained, should be introduced, and it is supposed to be helpful.
Undisputed.
Right.
Right.
And in case of those who really do not have any maybe behavioral issue, if you are suggesting that in case of in those cases also it's better to interchange the wheat, the sources of wheat,
yes,
combination of sources of
rice and quinoa and all these different grains.
Right.
And just while you were talking, I was recalling a 10-year-old child who came to me. He has been a very active. Why I'm saying this to you is because with COVID and vaccinations and all of these things, I think everyone is a candidate. We don't know who's to be spared. So these guidelines will not hurt anybody and will be positive for almost everybody we're talking about. And this child was a very athletically active child. He used to do 2 or 3 hours of intensive tennis and running, etc., and extremely energetic. And he had a mild COVID where he was not even given antibiotics or medication. And about a month later, their parents and grandparents were very worried because he seemed to be losing weight. He was very skinny even before, but he never looked gaunt. Now, suddenly he was looking bony, gaunt, and sickly. And they couldn't understand. When he came to me, he also had by then developed a very odd behavior pattern. He was hyperactive. He was unable to sit still. He was anxious. And so he was being taken to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician put them in touch with the psychologists and the psychiatrists. And he also had a borderline abnormal thyroid function and a borderline abnormal kidney function. All of these were not there ever before. And parents, and by the time 6 weeks down the line, he had almost lost 5 kilos. So he had become really weak, but he was energetic, and all this hyperactivity was starting. And I just told the parents, because they were in a complete dizzy, that, is it a kidney problem? Is it a thyroid problem? Is it a psychiatric problem? And he had already been prescribed pills by each doctor. And even to the extent some of the doctors suggested kidney transplant. So I said, look here, this child has been absolutely normal. In what has happened is just COVID has happened, and a mild COVID. We know the gut microbiome changes very profoundly with any of these, whether it's a vaccination or COVID. So just put him on this diet for 1 month and we'll repeat the tests. And literally within a month, the doctor who examined, the endocrinologist who examined this child after a month was shocked. Is it the same child? He had filled up. He was looking so much better. It was exactly the diet which we have just discussed. And from the weight point of view, we achieved a lot. The behavior, the mother came and told me, Auntie, I can just tell you that it seems like nothing ever happened to him. He's absolutely normal. And of course, all the tests are normal. And now it's been 6 months and it's all behind. But just to tell you that how profound these the impact of the diet is. And this child and these parents were otherwise going from doctor to doctor, pillar to post, not knowing what to do and what is wrong with their child. He's absolutely normal. And when he came to me, he could not sit still. 1 hour, he kept asking the same question over and over again, over and over. He's a tennis player. He was looking like a total mess.
That is so reassuring.
Yeah.
Nice to hear that. Do we have any other questions, Priyanka?
One that has again come from Advik's mom, that Advik was in a gluten-free diet for 2 years, but right now he's not on it. I'm not sure what his dietary choices are right now, but he's experiencing some sort of constipation that his mother is reporting. And she has also mentioned that Advik has been taking camel milk for 2 years, and now he's on almond and soy milk. So, what can we do about the constipation is what she is willing to ask about. Yeah.
I think she needs an individual dietary counseling to figure out what's going on and what other things. But if the child is on the border, we definitely need to. It shows that there is something going on. Constipation is a sign that the gut is not happy. So something that is not working.
Right, ma'am. And we have a wonderful suggestion. I mean, suggestion, appeal, request, whatever we can call it, from our dearest Devashish sir. Actually, the population we work with, and one that you also mentioned, that it is not always possible for people with all the financial backgrounds to maybe go for organic fooding or the substitute. So, can we get something which is easy to go back to? Like it can be a manual, it can be a user guide or a website where we can just go back and find some resources for ourselves when maybe we need things. So basically we can pass it on to the caregivers, the parents that we work around.
Well, I don't think I have a documentation like that, but all I can just tell you is that it need not, because we are working with kids, we don't give them organic suggestions, because that's really, it's not possible for me to initially put it in my household in practice. How can I expect everything to be organic for a person who is compromised also financially? And so it's the simple thing is we get results even then. We get to where we want to be even with regular food. So carrots, cucumbers, tomatoes, all the green leafy vegetables, colorful vegetables, bananas, guavas, seasonal fruits are not that expensive. Chanas, peanuts in Calcutta are easily available and not expensive. We can also get some kind of local small seeds, that maybe not flax seeds or chia seeds, etc. Maybe expensive, but you don't need too much of them. You need very small. Fish is available so easily. Coconut is available so easily. They're not expensive. And and mustard oil is also inexpensive. So you can build the diet up with good high omega content with fish and mustard and those little seeds The spices are haldi, etc., are all there or are very valuable and anti-inflammatory. And, getting onto rice, unpolished rice, hand-pounded rice is also not expensive. So it can be very, if you really talk of value-added processed foods, those become a little problematic and will not be always possible. But basic food is really not an issue.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Ishi. It had been a very, very informative session, and I'm sure it's an enlightening session for most of us. And I'm sure the suggestions, the insights that you have shared, this is not just a diet plan. Rather, it's a decision to have a different form of eating, a different form of eating habit, and it's a complete shift. It's not just a different diet plan. So I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it has to start one day, but this is a decision that we need to make, and that can only lead to a successful anti-inflammatory diet plan and diet practice. And as you can understand, we need you a lot more in Kolkata. And I'm sure the participants that we have, and there are many beyond who have joined today, they would like to consult you in person as well, because there are very specific kind of challenges which cannot be addressed in a webinar or this kind of platform. So we are looking forward to have you here in Kolkata, and I need a date from you whenever it's possible for you in the month of April, May, or whatever suits you, so that we can inform all the participants, and there are people beyond, and they can be helped, because this is something which is not discussed very frequently. We do not talk about food that frequently, and this turns out to be such an important area where it doesn't matter how much therapy, how much special education, how much parental training we do. It's a multidisciplinary, it's a multifaceted management planning, which food and nutrition is a part of it. So the other initiatives that won't work if we do not take into account food, nutrition, and this part of the challenges. So we look forward to you. We need you in Kolkata, and for parental training, for professionals training, and for individual consultations. I'm very hopeful. You have never said no to me. So, and no to Kolkata, and no to such individual needs ever. So I'm very sure that we will be seeing you in Kolkata very soon.
My pleasure, would most certainly be there. And
Yes.
look forward to helping you all as much as possible.
Yes. Priyanka?
Thank you for having me, Amrita. Thank you, Priyanka.
It's our pleasure, Ishi, that you are a part of this webinar today. I know how busy you are, and it's a pleasure that you have given your time for all of us and all the participants today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So much.
Thank you so much, Ishi.
Grateful from all of us in the DeepRanjani Foundation are so grateful to have you here with us, and we really want more of you. Because when we were talking about it, I was actually thinking about food and mental health and relationships, and it needs to be explored even more. So really looking forward to having you here in person with us, ma'am. And a small request to the participants that we are organizing series of webinars like this. We will keep you posted via mail and WhatsApp. Please be a part of the session as you have always been. And ma'am, we would again have you with us very soon. We would love to have you with us very soon. Thank you, ma'am. Take care.
Thank you so much, Ishi. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.